Now, our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett joins us live now because, Kimberly, we are waiting to hear from President Trump. He was meant to start speaking about 15 minutes ago. We're still waiting for him to make some remarks in the White House Rose Garden. Do we have any indication as to what he's going to say?
We got a bit of a sense of it from the White House press briefing that took place earlier. This was our first indication something might be happening as we await this statement from the Rose Garden. I can tell you that the White House press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, did suggest that there would be potentially additional assets. That's all she said. About an hour later, we saw the convoy of the carriers carrying military, police and soldiers, National Guard. We understand about 200 of them that were deployed, parading down Pennsylvania Avenue and being deployed around the city, we understand. And this is really consistent with the message that Donald Trump delivered, not just to the governors in a teleconference today, but also on Saturday when he spoke about the death of George Floyd. In fact, he promised that he would not give in to anarchy, not allow America's cities to burn. He said leftist thugs will not be allowed to set our communities ablaze. We must protect those who have the least. So the U.S. president promised at that time that he would deliver a heavy-handed presence in coordination with local law enforcement. And this is a tricky area for the president. Bear with me because I'll tell you about two different pieces of law in the United States and why the president is navigating a fine line. The first is posse comitatus from 1878. Essentially what this means is that it limits the federal military when it comes to enforcing domestic policies. In other words, governors have the power, not the president. He can offer assistance, but it's the governors that have to request it, and even then they can only play a supporting role. Now, there is a bit of an exception in all of this, and this will be the fodder for constitutional and legal scholars if something is to happen and the U.S. president is set to deploy in greater force, and that is the Insurrection Act of 1807. And essentially what this does is it gives the president the constitutional power to restore order from insurrection or civil unrest. It's not used very often. In fact, the last time we saw it was 1992 when there were riots in Los Angeles. So it's possible in the Rose Garden that the U.S. president is going to invoke the act, the Insurrection Act of 1807. This would be astounding. We've certainly had some intimations that he promised that he might do something never seen before, I think was his phrasing. He certainly has suggested that, and we know Donald Trump has a showmanship aspect to his presidency. He likes things to be big and powerful. On July 4th, he has enjoyed sort of parading the military apparatus. He promised to do that again on Independence Day, July 4th. He seems to have a fascination with the military, and it was quite shocking to see the military being paraded down Pennsylvania Avenue for something such as quelling civilian unrest. Now, I can tell you that right now in the park outside me, Lafayette Park, there still is a very heavy Secret Service presence. There's the Park Police presence. That is the police force that guards the national monuments, walking distance from the White House. They are on horseback. We have Secret Service in riot gear. And this is all facing off in addition to the soldiers that we now see. It's not active duty, and that's an important distinction, but it's the National Guard ready to support. The White House press secretary saying that the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, who the president says he put in charge today, we're not exactly clear what that means, but he believes there are studies that show that just the physical presence of the military in some form or fashion is a deterrent factor from civil unrest. So we're watching this podium very carefully, still awaiting the president. He is behind schedule. We've not had an explanation as to why this is delayed. It was a rather abrupt, I don't know if you just heard that boom. We're trying to make sense of what that might be. And I will defer to my photographer, Rob Michaud, who does have a background in a military background and is assessing what that might be. But again, that was a little bit surprising, a very loud boom, something we've not, and there it goes again. I'm not sure if you're picking that up, but it is coming from the area of the protesters. It sounds like flash grenades are going off. Shihab Rattansi may have a better idea what's happening. He is out there with the protesters, but I do know that the park police on horseback is advancing through the crowd. So it does appear in advance of this curfew that is set to take place coming up in about 25 minutes' time that the police and potentially the military are getting into position to quell the potential unrest that has occurred for 3 consecutive nights. I can also tell you that I hear helicopters overhead that may also be supporting that. Now, from pictures that I can see, I'm not sure what pictures you may be able to see, but I do see some people with their hands up in the air, perhaps feeling slightly nervous about the sounds that they are hearing. And there we go again. We have another very loud boom, another one. It is getting increasingly tense. I can tell you that Donald Trump likes a very big show of force, and that is what we may be anticipating. The booms keep continuing. We see protesters from the shot that I can see with their hands in the air. It does seem to be a little bit silent as people try to figure out what in fact is going on. So we continue to wait for the U.S. president. It's still, the podium is still set up in the Rose Garden. He has still not appeared, almost a half hour late now from the time we are told he would make a statement. Still trying to just decipher, Barbara, what is happening right now. But events unfolding, and really we have been given no explanation about what's going to happen next.
And yeah, Kimberly, we could see some pictures there of Shihab Rattansi, who, of course, is with the protesters just outside of the White House. We're trying to establish a connection with him so that we can actually ask him exactly what it was. Just remind us there. I mean, we heard, I think in total, what, 6, 7 of these booms? What do we suspect they are?
Robbie, you're going to have to remind me again. I'm really using the guidance of my producer/photographer. He believes that they're flash grenades. He has more of a background in this than I do. These would be something that is used to kind of deter the crowd, to scare them, to sort of head home. This is sort of a tactic for controlling the crowd. I can tell you the streets, not even just around the White House, but I have been told by some of my sources that, in fact, the streets, not just the White House, but also the U.S. Capitol, in fact, have been heavily locked down. There is a heavy presence, not just the park police, not just the Secret Service, but also the FBI,
Kimberly,
the Drug Enforcement
forgive
Agency.
me, I just stop you there. We'll cross live to you again, especially when we get the U.S. president. Let's go to Shihab Rattansi. Shihab, you are outside the White House with the protesters. In the past few minutes, we've heard some very loud booms. What can you see? What could you hear?
Yeah, we heard the flashbang grenades. There's another one there. And the smoke has begun. Does seem to be smoke, not tear gas. And pepper spray, and they're moving in pretty aggressively now. And way behind there, which you probably can't see, but I can see, I think the military police as well. Jesus. So, really, I checked the boxes about half an hour ago. They made announcements through, calling everyone to disperse, which was a signifier that something was about to happen. And now the police have moved in. So that entire area where we were standing has been cleared in front of the White House. There was a particularly interesting, perhaps slightly macabre moment, though, where just before this all happened, a besuited figure was seen behind the police line, in between us, between the police line and the White House. And multiple reports are now saying, multiple reports are now saying that it was Attorney General Barr who was standing there observing things, the calm before the storm. Protesters throwing back the smoke grenades at the police, rather successfully, actually. So the police just threw their smoke grenades over here, and then the protesters have learned a thing or two and threw them right back at the police.
Shihab, there have been protests going on outside the White House now for a while. Is this worse than what we've seen before?
I mean, usually the police in the past couple of... This has only been going on since Friday, and usually this sort of thing goes on after dark. But it's been brought to 7 o'clock local time, as opposed to 11 o'clock. And the police feel that they want to clear out the protesters. However, what we see is that there isn't necessarily any joined-up thinking in that where did the protesters then go? Well, then they just spread around D.C., of course. Is it better to keep everyone in a focal point outside the White House where people were peacefully protesting until the police, and still are peacefully protesting, or is it best to get them very angry and disperse them around the city? It's one of those questions, I guess, for a police classroom. You'd think that they may have gone through that in the past, though. As you can see, though, Mike, let's take a look. Everyone's taking a knee over here, just to show that, look, this isn't devolving into clashes, as we often see on the media. These are peaceful protesters, and there are police over there who are determined to stop them from protesting. It's as simple as that.
And Shia, in about 20 minutes from now, the curfew is about to start. So at that point, presumably, the police would have a reason to make sure that these people leave.
Right, I think that's already their reason when they were telling everyone to disperse, that the curfew was approaching. I mean, the curfew, I mean, the general sense is, of course, look, there has to be a presence here because, frankly, authorities only respond to fear and they only respond to action on the streets. And as soon as you end your action on the streets, well, then it's all back to business as usual. More loud bangs. But things have quietened down for the moment.
These pictures coming live to us from outside the White House, where we have seen police use flash grenades or stun grenades there to try to disperse protesters who've been demonstrating outside the White House for hours now. A curfew is due to come into place in about 15 minutes or so from now. The police have warned protesters that they are there to disperse them.